Hi, my name is Hector Del Castillo, Chief Product Officer at BoldPM, and I'd like to welcome all of you to today's episode. Today's topic is finding purpose and using it at work. And our guest speaker today is Gabrielle Bosché. Gabrielle, how are you today?
I'm doing awesome. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
All right, welcome. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker and the topic of finding purpose and using it at work. And our guest speaker today is Gabrielle Bosché, who's co founder of the Purpose Company. Gabrielle, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this particular topic of purpose?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. So I started my career and really kind of became known as the millennial expert. So early on in my career, I really got into generational leadership. I wrote my first book about millennials when I was 17. I've written four since. I've written five in total. And it's been a really fascinating journey. And so sometimes folks who know me kind of from that past life of working on generations, they'll oftentimes look at me like, how in the world did you get into this purpose space? And it's actually kind of a funny story. We got into this space, my husband Brian and I, who run the company together. We've written the last book that just was released last week, The Purpose Factor, Extreme Clarity for Why You're Here and What to Do About It. We wrote that together and we get to work together every day, which is a ton of fun. But we got into this purpose space really by accident. It was really interesting. My husband actually, before we met, he was selling self-help products and commission only, not making a whole lot of money. And his mentors, his friends, everyone kept saying, you need to figure out your purpose. Well, at the same time, I was kind of having one of those purpose crises myself where the generational space, we call it the quarter life crisis, where you turn 25 and you think, oh my gosh, what in the world am I doing with my life? So we both were kind of on this purpose journey independently. And so when we met, we both had kind of discovered that everyone kept telling us to find our purpose, but no one told us how. And so we assumed something so important should have a process. And so we looked at everything from ancient religions, popular philosophies, modern day motivators. We started really looking into what do all of these people say and what are the themes that are in common when it comes to purpose discovery. And we found that there were four essential elements to discovering your purpose, which I'll talk about later on in our time together. And as we were going through this process, we started to share it with our family and our friends. And then friends would come over and we'd help them find their purpose. And then friends would invite friends. And then before we knew it, we were doing weekend events and leadership retreats. But it was still independent of kind of what we were doing in the corporate space. My company, the Millennial Solution, works with organizations, the military. We work with nonprofits, government agencies, and Fortune 500 companies on bridging the generation gap. And so I remember one day we were training a Fortune 200 company, and it was 2 days of training. And Hector, I know that you know this as a trainer. Sometimes you just need a break. It'd been about 4 hours of training in a row. I hadn't taken a break at that point. And so I turned to my husband, who wasn't on the docket to speak that day. And I said, hey, can you take over for me? Like, mama needs a snack. Like, I need to get out. I need a protein bar. I need something. I was like, I'm getting hangry. And anyway, so I took a break, walked outside. I came back in like 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, and everyone is crying. And I look at my husband, I'm like, what did you do? Like, what in the world happened while I was gone? And he was talking about purpose. He was starting to use this purpose discovery process in the corporate space. And I will readily admit that I did not think that there was necessarily a place for purpose in the corporate space. I'm a researcher by trade. And so we're really focused on how do we make sure that there's a clear ROI, that there's clear data, that we have clear information. And so purpose felt a little fluffy for me. And so we started to discuss purpose on a corporate level, on a leadership level, because we started to see the impact it was having internally. And just at that one meeting, that one initial meeting where we really discussed such an important element of leadership, I remember there was one of the individuals who was in the room. We asked him to, one of the elements of your purpose factor is called your origin story. And so we asked him to explain his origin story, which is the moment that most shaped your perspective. And he told this story about how he was in college and he was walking home from his dorm room, and he walked into the room, and his roommate was there with a gun barrel pushed to the back of his throat, ready to commit his own life. And this guy runs over, pulls the gun barrel out, helps him find purpose at work, helps him find meaning in life. And somehow this guy gets into HR. Well, that was, 20 years ago, but this guy's now crying, realizing that's why he got into HR, is because he recognized that there's meaning in work. And if he can help people find meaning and purpose at work, then that's really fulfilling his purpose. So fast forward about 7 years, and here we are, where we're now working with leaders, organizations, and military, as well as individuals, to help them first discover their purpose and secondarily apply it to what they do every day.
Very interesting. So you mentioned several different points, and I actually would like to go through the questions, and then we can actually come back to some of those things, some of the points that you made earlier as to why it's so important. But I think that the first question I have for you is the one that is about, why is it so important for people to really find purpose in order to be successful? I think you mentioned some of this earlier, but can you elaborate a little bit more about why it's important for each one of us to find our purpose, and how to view it in such a way that this is what success means to each and every one of us?
Sure. I think purpose and success are so integrally connected. They're really one and the same. So some people measure success by fame and fortune, influence and money. But really, I think most of us would agree that success is living a fulfilled life at the end of the day. And fulfillment looks different for every single person. So purpose is what you have inside of you to help other people. Plain and simple. That's all it is. It's what you have inside of you to help other people. But what most people don't realize is fulfillment is the result of helping other people with what you have. And so if you understand your purpose, what's unique about you, how you're uniquely equipped and gifted and positioned to help other people, then you'll start to recognize that when you are most fulfilled, you're most on, you're most alive, are those moments where you are using your purpose to help other people. And so purpose and success are really, really connected, because we know, we either know personally, or we've heard stories of people who make it, in the mega millionaire status, where they wake up and they're still unsatisfied, unfulfilled, and frustrated. And then we know plenty of other people who don't make as much monetarily, or maybe don't have the influence that you would think of as success. They consider themselves extremely fulfilled and happy, and that's success for them. So success is extremely personal. And I think it's really dangerous when we start to compare our idea of success to those ideas of that is either perpetrated through social media or through kind of keeping up with the Joneses. I think comparison is one of the biggest killers of purpose, because when you're comparing your status, your influence, your lifestyle, your impact to someone else, you're really trying to covet someone else's purpose rather than taking the time to commit to your own. And so that's why I think purpose is so important, is because it really helps you define success for yourself. It really helps you get clarity about what fulfillment looks like for you, and actually starts to attach a metric to fulfillment versus just making fulfillment, happiness, and success these kind of base platitudes. I think purpose really starts to attach some numerical value to what those things mean for you in your life.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next question, and we can revisit. And I would like to encourage the audience to also submit any questions, because we are going to have a Q&A portion so that we can actually, have that conversation. And also, if you have any comments, type them into the chat. I'll be also including those as we get going. So, if let's say that I'm looking for a purpose right now because I'm lost, and I think that it often happens. And actually, I read a study that was published earlier this year on Harvard Business Review saying that all of us, and this is a global phenomenon, are experiencing mid-career or midlife crisis, which has to do with, our work, our life, and the fact that sometimes there's blurred lines, and we're unhappy across anything that we've done right now for work, but also in our personal lives. So if I'm at that point where I'm at this junction that I'm in a midlife crisis, how do I find my purpose?
Yep. Yeah. And I think so many people are asking this question, particularly folks who are now working from home that weren't working from home before, folks who maybe lost their job or in transition, or people, frankly, who just have more white space on their calendar. Whereas before it was all, booked up. They didn't even have time to think about why am I here and what should I do, because they were getting the kids off to school or going on to happy hours and networking or launching their businesses or following up. The busyness of life can be so distracting. And the interesting thing is oftentimes when we're checking things off our list, it feels like we're moving in a particular direction. It feels like momentum, but it's really not. Unless you're going in a particular direction that's aligned with your purpose, you're really just staying busy. You're not necessarily being intentional or effective. And this process of discovering your purpose, I think, is so important. It's one of the kind of core questions that we as humans have. No one teaches us that we should be thinking big and having these kind of existential moments in our life. And oftentimes people wait for big moments or bad moments to be able to really determine, should I really find out my purpose? So a lot of times people wait for breakups, or they wait for bad relationships. They wait for layoffs. They wait for bad economies or sickness for them to be in a place where they finally feel like they can discover their purpose. And so we talk a lot about in our new book, The Purpose Factor, that you can either choose your crisis or your crisis is going to choose you. So every single person on the planet will have a crisis of purpose. It could be when they're in their teens, their 20s, their 90s, whatever that looks like. But every single person has this kind of chip inside of us that we have this question of, why am I here and what should I do? Because really, and this is important for leaders, especially in the business space, to understand that every single person on the planet wants to know, who am I and does what I do matter? And so as a business leader, it's incredibly important to have conversations around purpose at work, because your people want to know that what they do matters. And more importantly, they want to know that they themselves matter. And so this process of purpose discovery, as I mentioned before, is really 4 core elements of what we've been able to discover and really distill based off of about 15,000 hours of research, looking at what works, what's applicable, what do these interpretations of ancient philosophies and popular religions all say about purpose. So there are 4 core elements. The first element is what we call natural advantage. Your natural advantage is the role that you tend to play. Now, natural advantage is different than natural talent, because a lot of people will say, well, I'm not really talented in that area. Talent is just kind of a natural proclivity to do something. So you may be naturally talented to run fast or sing well or tell jokes. That doesn't necessarily help inform your purpose. It may help you inform your vocation, but it doesn't necessarily explain why you're here. You're certainly not here on the planet to throw a baseball if you're really good at baseball. You're here on the planet to help other people with what you have. So natural advantage is the role you tend to play. So it could be anything from, you're naturally a teacher, you're naturally a recruiter, you get people excited about things, you're naturally a builder, you start things really easily, you don't have startup anxiety. But there are 5 core elements within natural advantage that we help people discover. So that way they can get really clear about, what kind of role do I play, whether it's in my family, my group of friends, or certainly my role at work. When you start to get clarity about what your natural advantage is, it really starts to help inform the type of work you like to do. So for example, if your natural advantage is that you're a teacher, every time you learn something, you're instantly turning around and wanting to teach someone else. And so you've got this kind of excitement about, oh, my headphones just died. Let me see if I can reconnect them. Wonders of technology is seeing how technology will last. Okay, I think we should be fine still. So that natural advantage is really going to inform what type of work you're doing. So you could have 5 different salespeople and they all have different natural advantages. So if you're a salesperson and your natural advantage is that you're a teacher, you're wanting to teach the other people, to teach the people you're trying to sell, or teach your fellow salespeople. If your natural advantage is that you're a recruiter, you're going to be a natural salesperson where you love sharing what you're excited about and you want to get other people just as excited as you. If your natural advantage is that you're a builder, you start things really easily, you're probably going to be starting programs, starting training, trying to think outside of just what your current role is, and you're wanting to build based off of what it is you're doing or experiencing. So understanding your natural advantage is really important. The second element of your purpose is what we call your pull passion. And your pull passion is the problem in the world that you want to solve. And I'll talk more about why passion and purpose are conflated and why they're not the same, and why thinking that they're the same is actually really dangerous. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's important to recognize that your purpose isn't your passion, it isn't your hobby, isn't what you like to do on the weekends. Because people may say they're passionate about coffee or golf or bread making or whatever that looks like, but that's really something you're interested in. That's not necessarily what your purpose is. Your pull passion is the problem in the world you want to solve. As humans, we're all designed to be problem solvers. Every single business, every industry is about solving problems. And so if you recognize that you as a human are designed to solve problems, to think through things, to come up with solutions, that's where you find fulfillment. Then you can really start to recognize how your purpose plays into what it is that you're doing. So your pull passion is simply getting clarity about the types of problems you like to solve. So your pull passion could be solving really big problems, complicated problems, overwhelming problems, or it can be solving small specific problems. Some people love solving problems for like single moms who need help redecorating their offices. Other people like solving really big, complicated problems, like how do we get water into Africa, and how do we drill wells? How do we handle human trafficking? So those types of problems you like solving is also going to be important. The third element of your purpose is your acquired skills. Your acquired skills are the abilities that you've attained either through education or experience. So that's everything from the schooling that you've experienced, the expertise you've developed on the job, and the life experience that you have. And understanding with real clarity about the skills that you have is important, because purpose isn't just a platitude and it's not just a theory. Your purpose really comes from what you're able to do for others. And so that purpose and action is really where your acquired skills come from. And the final element of your purpose is what we call origin story, which I briefly mentioned before. And your origin story is the moment in your life that has given you the most perspective. Typically, it's something that's happened to you before the age of 20. And that origin story is really important, because when you start to recognize that you can actually redeem every bad day, terrible experience, embarrassing moment, and failure, you can actually use that to help other people overcome. So we call origin stories your overcomer story. And so when you really get clarity about what that origin story is for you, that moment that most shaped you, is going to be really important. And so there are 5 different types of origin stories as well. You could be a trauma overcomer. So maybe something happened to you when you were younger that it was either physical trauma, emotional trauma, sexual trauma. You could be a failure overcomer, where maybe you did something that completely messed up your future, seemingly felt like it at the time. You either didn't make the team, or you experienced bankruptcy, or you fell to an addiction. You can also be a rejection overcomer, where you were rejected for who you are or what you believe, particularly by those who love you most. You can be a loss overcomer. If someone in your life you were close to, you lost them and it really impacted the way that you see the world and how you think that the world sees you. And finally, you can be a betrayal overcomer. You trusted someone and they either turned their back on you, or they did something to betray your trust. And now that was a really pivotal moment in your life. And so for myself, I'm a rejection overcomer. My origin story, a lot of people maybe have seasons of challenges when you're younger. Maybe it was hard for you to see your parents get divorced, or it was really difficult being raised in the family that you were raised in. But for origin story, it's really important to get clarity about what that single moment was for you. Because once you get clarity about that moment, you can really start to see the connection point of how it's influenced how you've gotten to the place that you're at now. So for me, I'm a rejection overcomer. My origin story comes from the fact that I was raised in an alcoholic household. I had a single moment with my dad where he didn't even realize he was doing it. But at the time, he was drunk in the chair and said something like, I wish that I had a son. I'm the second of 2 girls. I was I was kind of the last hope for my parents to have a kid at the age that they had me. And as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, I didn't recognize it at the time, but I then interpreted that as if I was more masculine, or if I was a man, I would somehow make my dad happier. And so I started dressing like a boy. I started playing all the sports. I started acting out in a way that would make him feel like make me feel like he would accept me at the time. And so that's really where my addiction to achievement started, where I really felt like my worth was based off of my grades, my success, my outward appearance. And so just understanding your core origin story can help you then look back and see, what have I overcome and how can I help other people overcome as well? So I use my origin story every day. I help others who are also too addicted to achievement, who feel like they're not worthy unless they're working towards something, or people who feel like they've got to constantly be going after the biggest goal or the better goal to really feel like they're worthy of love. And so that's really where I spend my time, is helping people overcome what I myself have been able to overcome. So in a nutshell, those are the 4 elements of how you find your purpose, and getting clarity about how those 4 things fit together, and then using that as a way to be able to find more fulfillment and help more people is really one of the key elements of living a successful life.
This is great. We have lots of follow-up questions, and I actually want to ask some of these relating back to some of the things you shared. So thank you so much. One of the questions is, are you can you be self-aware enough as a young adult, when you're already, let's say, in your early 20s, to be able to define all those points that you mentioned? When I started thinking about, back when I was your age, I was just doing and following many of the things, and I did not encounter what I would call the middle age crisis until later. So I think that sometimes, depending on the generation and sometimes depending on the nature, you may actually have a longer time when you're getting into a crisis situation about who you are, what you're doing. So can you tell me, on the average, is that typical for you to encounter something like in your mid-20s?
Yeah, it certainly, I think, depends on the person. I think more and more, especially in a society that is really elevating having a purposeful career and having a life that doesn't just cause you to make a living, but to make a difference. I think in the world that we're now living, I think people are asking these questions a lot earlier on in life, where they recognize that their meaning can't just come from their job. Their meaning has to come from something inside of them. So I certainly think that the conversation around purpose is happening at a much earlier age. I mean, our book, The Purpose Factor, is now being used as required reading inside of universities. We've been doing a lot with high school students and college students who are wanting to find their purpose before they get into a career that they may or may not love, and really help inform the kind of next step. Because what we found is purpose has really become, once you understand your purpose, it becomes a decision-making paradigm for you. Then you get to determine, is this aligned with my purpose or is it not? Most people wander through life and really let life happen to them. They let the job find them, or they finally make the change if they've been let go, or life is kind of forcing them to make a decision, forcing them to either lose weight because of a disease, or forcing them to work on themselves because of a failed relationship, or forcing them to fix their finances because of a bankruptcy. I mean, really, so many people really go through life kind of blindfolded to the fact that they have a choice on how they want their life to end up. And so I think really, whether you're 22 or 62 or 92, the conversation around purpose is certainly, I think, extremely, extremely relevant. But I think culturally, the conversation around purpose has really moved from maybe that typical midlife, hey, I'm now in my 40s or 50s and want to decide, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? I think we've got a new generation of people who want to change the world, who want to make a difference, and are asking these questions at much younger ages.
Oh, very, very interesting. And I think it's right on as far as observation. I think across generations, this happens at different times in life, and often I think you're right. I think right now what we're seeing is that lifespan of when you get into a peak and then go into a valley in your life, and the valley meaning it's a crisis of some sort from your personal perspective, it's getting shorter. I think that personally, in especially in my career and in my work life. I've read a recent study saying that most people right now are encountering some sort of issue with what they're doing for work about on the average every 7 years. And if you look at, the divorce rate and, how often that happens also once you get married, they're saying it's a 7 year average. And so often it goes that, especially I think this is a very a phenomenon that happens here in US with anyone that is born and raised in US. We attach so much about our personal worth to our careers that it impacts, whatever happens in our careers impacts our private life as well. And that's what I think is 7 years is the average for having a work crisis, and that equates into having a life crisis. And this is where divorces, tend to be on the 7 year average is what most couples last, for the most part. Yes, there's people that are outliers. Sometimes it happens more often, some later, but that's the average overall. And I think it's kind of no surprise to me that it coincides with your career crisis also affects your private life as well. I wasn't really sure if you have actually looked at that, the impact of work with your private life.
Yeah, certainly. And I think during a season where many people are having to reconcile those two worlds, I think is incredibly important. Just as a society, as a workforce, we've certainly seen that work-life balance has become a more popular topic. I actually don't believe in work-life balance. It's more like work-life integration. And now as people are beginning to work from home, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, we're now seeing people having to reconcile those two worlds because there is, you're right, so much research out there that actually shows if you get in a fight with your spouse or partner on your way into work, your productivity goes down. If you have a sick child or a sick parent at home, your engagement goes down. So there's something called presenteeism, where you're actually physically there at work, but mentally gone. And that's just as expensive if you're an employer than if the person's actually gone, either at home with a sick child or parent, or, they're just, physically not there if they're not showing up for work. And so that can be just as expensive, and depending on the type of job that they're doing, just as dangerous. And so having really important clarity about their purpose and finding fulfillment, so that way when people come into work, they come into work, they're mentally there, they're mentally engaged. And that really comes from, at its most fundamental core, is understanding first that they matter, and secondarily that the work that they do matters. And I think that's really the big shift and how the economy is going. We used to be in a much more transactional type economy, where I come in and I work for you and you give me money, you give me a paycheck, you maybe give me some retirement and some weeks off a year to go on vacation with my family. That's really changed. It's not just a transaction. Really, you're looking more for a transformation inside of the economy. And so now you're seeing that people are coming into work for a company. They want to make the company a better place, but they want the company to make them a better person as well. And so now what we're really starting to see is we've moved from the transaction economy to the transformation economy. Now I believe we're moving into what's called the purpose economy, where organizations, companies, even universities are all recruiting and retaining based off of this idea of purpose. I think that the challenge is that not a lot of people have a framework or an understanding around purpose, which is, really where we've spent the last, few years of our time really researching, looking at data to see, hey, does knowing your purpose keep people longer? Does knowing your purpose increase engagement or productivity or revenue? And the overwhelming answer that we've had from our own research, including case studies with our clients, is yes. We've had organizations where we've got a gym client who has over 500 employees go through our process of discovering their purpose, helping their managers discover their purpose and lead from a place of purpose. They had their revenue go up by 62%. We've had another organization with a similar size, or about 400, 450. They went through the same process. They actually found that their revenue went up by 49%. So we've seen increased retention, engagement, and certainly revenue simply by integrating this concept of purpose and applying it in a way that's really practical for business leaders, whether you're leading 10 people or 1,000 people.
It's very interesting. Some of the things that you've talked about, I think, trigger a lot of different thoughts about, what I see happening. I know for a fact that in the last few years, as different surveys have been done as to measuring the level of engagement of employees across organizations, and here in U.S., the level of disengagement is high. I'm talking like close to 70% of employees across any organization is disengaged, some level of disengagement. So to me, is it the fact that people are just unable to recognize when they're going through a crisis and then very quickly find their purpose, and that once that continues, they just continue to be disengaged because they're just emotionally unattached to anything, not just work, but pretty much around. It starts spreading around in their lives. And what happens to those people that actually are able to get through some sort of intervention, that they can realign and start recognizing their purpose? What happens to them in their careers? Did they start recapturing, all of those things around, from work to private life?
Sure. And I think what's really important and what we've seen happen time and time again is that when employees find their purpose, it's not that they now say, well, I need to switch my job. It's now that they understand that their job has meaning. I recently was working with a couple of executives, and as they were getting ready to bring us in, they're like, hold on, if we bring you in and you help our employees find their purpose, are they all going to leave? It was like a huge concern for them, which was very interesting. And I think reflects a lot of the culture, but I think within that company, but I think it's probably a big question that leaders have is, well, what if they find their purpose and it's not here? And so to that, there are kind of two answers. I think first and foremost, purpose is vocation agnostic. So when you understand your purpose, you can use it whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you are an accountant, whether you're a professional athlete, whatever that looks like. It really doesn't matter what you do for a living. It's you understanding how to apply your purpose. So that job you have becomes a platform for you to be able to help other people. So I think that's really important. And as we teach purpose inside of companies, we don't teach someone, hey, here's your purpose. You now need to leave and start a nonprofit, or you now need to leave and, go and be a coach or consultant. Really, wherever you're at, you have permission to use your purpose. You can't delay it. You can't say, well, I'll do it when I'm retired, or I'll do it when I have more time on my calendar, or I'll do it when I switch jobs next time. Now is the time for you to be able to use your purpose. And that's really important. But secondarily, I think it's also too important to recognize that when you know your purpose, you actually are more connected to the work that you're doing. And so if you know that the job in front of you is a platform for you to use your purpose, it shifts your perspective entirely. We were working with a doctor a couple of years ago who he came to us. He's like, I need to figure out what's next for me. I don't feel like what I'm doing is really that fulfilling. I know I help people, but I think I'm kind of made for more. Well, we took him through our purpose factor process, helped him get extreme clarity about his purpose. He came back to us 2 weeks later and he said, I can't believe this. But he said, I have completely shifted the way that I see my work. He said, every patient that comes into my office now is the person I'm supposed to use with help with my purpose. It was a really profound moment for him because he kept looking externally for a new thing. He's a builder, so he was always trying to start something new he could do, something new he could apply himself to, thinking the bright, shiny object was going to be the thing that brought him fulfillment and clarity of purpose, when in reality, his purpose was there all along. And so sometimes as people go through this process, they'll actually discover, wow, I actually don't need to make a big shift or a big change externally. The big change that needs to happen is internal, and getting clarity on your purpose is the best way to start.
Thank you so much. There's some comments here that I want to kind of read to you. Some of the comments are that, what you're describing is just not specific to a generation, that it can be applies to multiple generations, whether you're a boomer, Gen X, millennial, or even the next generation that is just now becoming and growing into becoming young adults. I think it applies across, and I think that I don't know if you agree with that statement, but I do. I don't know if you have any comments regarding that.
And I couldn't agree more. It is definitely a conversation that whether you're new in your career, you've been in your career for many years, or you're kind of on the eclipse side of your career, kind of moving into retirement and after, that this conversation is incredibly important, because there's really no age capacity on purpose discovery. You can find it when you're young, you can find it when you're old. And I think that there was a comment in there about really looking for your origin story if you're younger than 20. We work with a lot of students and helping them really identify what that moment is for them. And so since typically your origin story happens before the age of 20, helping students discover it usually isn't very hard. But there are also two secondary origin stories. So maybe, when you were younger, you had an origin story, you had a moment maybe with your dad who said you weren't good enough. And so that caused you to be a rejection overcomer. But then maybe in your 30s, you had cancer, and that really changed the way that you saw the world. And so you now have that secondary origin story of being a cancer overcomer. So now you're looking at how you can help other people overcome maybe their own setbacks, diseases, mindset challenges. And so I think that's important as well. Why origin story is really powerful to understand, especially when it comes to using your purpose, is because that origin story almost creates a muscle memory in you of how you react to challenges and setbacks. And so that almost creates this habit in your brain of how you react to circumstances. And so really spending time, I don't have a lot of time to go into it here on our chat today, but really going into where were you in that moment that most shaped you? What was happening? How did you react? And how does that now shape the way that you not only see the world, but you react to the world? When challenges happen, are you trying to prove someone wrong or prove someone right? When there's a loss of a relationship, do you get triggered into reacting the way that you did when you were younger, if you're a loss overcomer? So really spending time, and purpose is one of those things. The purpose discovery process isn't something to be experienced in 15 minutes or 25 minutes. It certainly is a process, and that's why we wrote our whole book, The Purpose Factor, about it, is to help you systematically really unfold your purpose and then understand not only why am I here, but secondarily, what should I do about it? And that's the purpose application part that's so incredibly powerful, is when you know your purpose, the question is naturally, now what? So what we've actually found is people who know their purpose but aren't using it are actually more frustrated, because they feel like, well, I know my purpose, I just don't have a way to use it. And so that's really where we spend a lot of our time, not only at the Purpose Company, but certainly in our training called Purpose Masteries. We help people apply their purpose to either determine what's next for them, to get clarity about the future, and to find that fulfillment that we've been talking about.
Thank you so much. So I think this question you've answered, because if I heard you correctly, by you being able to not understand only your purpose, but also know how to apply it, you can then be perceived really more as a leader, whether it's in your private life with family and friends or at work. Is that true, or is that something? Is this something different?
I think you're absolutely right in that once you do know your purpose, you're far more effective. I mean, really everything rises and falls on purpose. If you as a leader know your purpose, you're going to be more secure. You're going to be more intentional. You're going to be more giving. You're going to be more authentic. You're going to really have a lot of the values that we consider a great leader, because you're secure in yourself. You know who you are and you know what you're doing. Anytime you see an insecure leader, a leader who is overbearing and challenging, questioning everything you're doing, not trusting, a leader who is disorganized, it really comes back to a lack of purpose. Because when you have that purpose clarity, it really does create a roadmap for exactly what you should do next, and really helps you get a lot of clarity behind the work you're doing and the meaning that you're having. So oftentimes you see people become critical, condescending, and just rude, frankly, is because they don't know their purpose. And so I think, understanding that everything rises and falls on purpose, especially if you're a leader, I think is really important. So we have something we call the oxygen mask principle, is you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help other people. So as a leader, you need to find your purpose first before you can help others in your organization find their purpose as well.
I think it's right on. And I actually would like to shift over to the Q&A, but I have some announcements. And for those of you in the audience, I did send out this information via the chat. So all of this you have access to. There's a little more information about the Purpose Company, which is Gabrielle's company. and what they do. And it's about creating leaders by empowering them on how to find their purpose and apply their purpose, and then helping people do that so they can align everything in their lives in what they are, and they're happier, more successful. And also, there's a book that was just published this year, and it was just launched. And Gabby, when was this actually launched?
Last week. Yeah,
So
so
it's
maybe two
brand
weeks
new.
ago, actually.
Perfect.
Yeah, it is brand spanking new, guys. You can pick up a copy, and I even have one right here. So yeah, we're really excited. Please pick it up on Amazon. That would be great. It's been endorsed by folks like Brian Tracy and The Rock and Simone Biles, and so we've got a lot of amazing support. It just became top 10 books to read, I think, by USA Today. So everything I'm talking about is in this and more. So I definitely encourage you to check it out.
Thank you so much. And it is available through Amazon. So I actually looked into it, and it's also available as a Kindle version as well, which is great. And the other thing is also, I wanted to ask for those of you who are interested in doing some additional management leadership skill, which of these skills would you be most interested? And choose any of these. And it could be, you can even add others. You could share that via the chat. That would be great, because we're tracking this. And this is something that I'm personally looking to do more of, as I have now shifted my entire company to work on inspiring the next generation of product leaders. And what I'm finding is, often they may have hard skills, especially when they're technologists, engineers, software developers. These are all people that can do a lot of building, and often if they really want to be perceived as leaders, they need to align their purpose, and their purpose is maybe about being able to really sharpen their soft skills, and that is leadership and management skills. So this is where we're focusing on, and I'll talk a little more about BoldPM Academy. If you can type in any of the things that you're personally interested in developing for yourself in whatever it is that you do for life today, let me know, because we're looking at introducing new topics that align with the right things that you're looking for. And if you're interested in adding purpose to this, let us know as well. Share that via the chat, please. And a little bit more about my company. We're focused on inspiring the next generation of product leaders. This could be product owners, product managers, product marketing managers, anyone that has product and something that works in a product-centric or a company that actually has products. That's what we're doing. And we help in growing high-performing product teams, and also building organizations that have a growth engine. And we help define by focusing on the people and understanding their strengths and how they need to complement each other, and then help improve their process and apply that to their entire portfolio. So it's really about business transformation, and that business transformation starts with people first. BoldPM Academy is a series of live online workshops that we're starting this coming month in November, and we are announcing some topics. If you're interested, there's the short URL at the bottom of this page that has also been shared with you via the chat, is where you can find out more about upcoming courses, and we'll be adding a few more in the next few days in preparation for launching. We have those starting in a couple of weeks in November. We're going to continue those through 2021. And also, if you can answer this question, is your company today, whatever company you're working for, do they have a professional development stipend? And what this is that you may have discretionary budget that for every employee that you can choose, pick and choose whatever professional development topics you want to pursue, whether they're on demand or live online. Those are at your discretion. Let us know if you are in that type of company. We'd like to ensure that we know the type of coverage. And right now we're looking at studying those companies that actually do offer, and we think that many of the technology and software companies do have this type of discretionary funding available for professional and personal development for their own employees. Take advantage of those programs, and these are the kinds of things that you want to be looking for if you're looking to start building up your hard skills, but also your soft skills. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about upcoming workshops, you can contact me at hector@boldpm.com. And just email me and let me know if there's topics that you're interested in that you're not seeing. We can figure out how to add them, because I'm looking for more and more experts like Gabby who we can add to our program. And we're looking at doing this in the future, adding more content by partnering with the right experts. So let us know. We'll be working on that. And here's our contact information. And I think at this point, we're waiting for more questions. So we have a few minutes. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them via the chat. And Gabby, as we are looking into getting into Q&A to get the conversation started on Q&A, I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the right thing that's happening right now? Because I've seen that right now, as we were getting more and more, let's say, gender equality in the workplace. What most experts are saying is that right now, as what we're seeing in this economy, yes, some jobs are being created, there's been some churn, but really has turned around where more and more women are going back and be at home and stay at home, rather than actually be looking actively for work. And they're saying that whatever gains were made in the last few years of getting more and more women in the workplace, and this is happening in corporate environment, that now those numbers have been drastically reduced, because most of the people that right now are long-term unemployed and not looking at all are mostly women. I don't know if you have anything to share, or if you have had any discussions with organizations that are working on this from a human resources aspect, is how do you get back and recover what we had gained as far as gender equality in the workplace?
Sure. Yeah, it's something that we've actually studied quite a bit from a generational perspective, where we actually saw that millennial women were actually one of the first generations that started to reverse that trend, where as soon as millennial women started to have kids, that they were either working from home or lessening their workload significantly, or just choosing to leave the workforce to raise their children. And it's so interesting. There was a couple of years ago, we had an opportunity to speak in Peru, and we were down there at an HR conference, and there I was kind of discussing kind of the next generation millennials understanding of kind of gender and gender at work. And there was a woman who came up to me afterwards, and she said, me and my generation, she's a baby boomer. She said, we worked so hard to, as women in the corporate space, she said, to be taken seriously, to work our way up to the top. And she looked at me almost with tears in her eyes saying, is everything that we did for nothing? And I think it's really important that there's a generation of women in the workforce who understand that and it's not just women. I think men have done so much as well when it comes to work-life balance, when it's come to understanding the roles and responsibilities of parents, and how important it is to be a great parent, and how that influences you doing great work, that you can't just say, sacrifice your family, never see your kids. We were doing an executive retreat once with a number of really high-level attorneys, and we were talking about how the next generation isn't willing to give up time with their family or their friends just for their career. And you should have seen these partner level attorneys. It was just, they didn't even understand what I was saying, because for them, they said, well, yeah, we didn't go on vacation for like 10 years. My family, I barely saw them. And the sacrifice that was made, I think, was number one, a decision that they made, but number two, something I think that my generation should certainly respect rather than to criticize. And so I think as a society, I think it's really, really important, whether you're looking at a macro level or of overall women in the workforce, or a micro level of women in your workplace, is to understand that it really is a choice, and respecting the choice of whether it's a woman or a man who wants to stay at home, either with their kiddos or to launch their company on the side, or whatever that looks like. And I think that's really what the future of the workforce looks like, is it's so much more personalized. There's no more an expectation around the type of work that someone should do, or how long they should work, or where they should work from. Really, it's how do we optimize the human experience of work? And I think that's really what's so important. And as leaders, I think for us to be curious about how people feel best optimized, because you could say, oh yeah, I want you to come into work. But if they're thinking the whole time, well, I have this new nanny. I don't really trust the nanny. I'm kind of concerned. I would much rather be working from home. Well, their output, their productivity, and their overall demeanor is not going to be very great in the workplace. So it's not really worth it. So I think we're changing a lot of social norms around both men and women in the workforce of what it looks like, how we can best work together, and how we can integrate our life with our work.
I think you're right on. Actually, there were some comments that were being typed in, and Gary's saying, that he's seeing some transformation within companies where they're being more aware of things like maternity leave and even paternity leave for fathers, and that actually over time has created loyalty, with the workers. So when they see that the executives and leaders within the company are understanding of those kinds of things, they actually stay in those companies longer. I don't know if you have actually encountered that or actually exposed that to some of the companies that have been sort of like resisting making those type of changes because they're afraid that everybody will be becoming unproductive all of a sudden.
Sure. Yeah, I think, again, I think that the data really speaks for itself. Companies that are very data driven and metric oriented are starting to track those changes right now. I think that companies that recognize that there is a huge connection between a great home life and a great work life are going to be really important. And I think gender equality isn't just respecting women. I think it's respecting men in the workforce as well. And I think that's what Gary was talking about is companies that say, hey, we want you to be a good dad. It's not okay socially that we say, oh yeah, the woman should leave and go pick up the kids from school and the dad can stay and work later. I think that the gender roles have certainly changed. And I think part of that has been socially. I think part of that has been generational, that people are now seeing each other as partners versus as, one person has a more traditional role and whatever that tradition looks like for you. So I think as someone who studied generations for the last 15 years, as someone who's been in the workforce development space for the last 7, I'm very excited about what the future of this space has to hold, because I think that there's a lot of learning that still needs to be done and some unlearning perhaps as well. But I think kind of overall respect is a two-way street. And I think leaders who want to be respected need to show respect. And I think that's really such a profound opportunity that leaders now have in the workforce, is to give out the kind of respect that they want their employees to have for themselves first, and certainly for the company.
Yes, I think you're right on. Another comment that I see is that there was a member in the audience that says they like the idea of being able to redefine or reframe, so to speak, your origin story, especially when you've gone through something highly traumatic, like surviving cancer, or helping somebody else, one of your family members, survive cancer, and encourage them, support them when they're in need. How how do you think it impacts people when they're looking at that somebody that they really care about, somebody they love, is going through a tough situation, and they want to be encouraging, supporting, but they don't see that kind of support from their employers, where they're not necessarily have the liberal leave, so to speak. What happens to those type of employees over time?
Yeah, I think it's certainly difficult for an employee who is in a workplace where they don't feel like their time or their priorities are respected. And I think that's really an important responsibility that employers have, is to say simply, not just say to leave to take care of a family member, but maybe just leave to go do something that they care about. And so as an employer, it's not your job to judge their priorities, it's for you to support their priorities. So as an employer, I may not understand that you want to take off time to go maybe have a spiritual retreat somewhere, but that's clearly important to you. And so I can't judge and say that's more or less important than you taking off time to take care of a sick loved one or to raise your kids. So I think employers really need to kind of shift their mindset around saying, well, that's important to me, so I think that that's important. And I think that that's something that employers, I think, are some, depending on kind of the industry, I think are starting to do more of. I think as people are recognizing, again, back to the personalized experience of the workforce itself. But when it comes to reframing your origin story, everything comes down to gratitude. There's so much research that's been done around having changing the way that you view experiences as something that's happened to you to something that's happened for you. And so when you actually start to get into that place of not necessarily grateful that that trauma happened, you're not grateful for the trauma, but you're grateful for the perspective the trauma gave you. And so recognizing, why are you thankful that you were in that experience, or that happened to you, or you survived that event? Because it's giving you a perspective that's really your superpower that no one can take away from you. Your origin story is a great differentiating factor when you're looking for jobs. It's a great differentiating factor if you're looking for clients. It really completely sets you apart. And so that's really what our hope is at the Purpose Company, that we normalize conversations around origin story and purpose overall, so that people can really see purpose as the platform that they build everything on top of, rather than platitude of something that's nice to have.
Gabby, did you have any closing comments at all?
No, I don't think so. I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity, thankful for everybody who's been in attendance here. And if you can't pick up the book, that would be, I know Gary already said that he picked it up on Kindle. Overachiever. I appreciate that very much. So pick up the book. It means a lot. And it helps us get the word out and get more books in the hands of people who need it most.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for this great conversation. I want to also thank the audience for being very engaged. And reach out to either Gabby or myself. Here's our contact information once again, so that you can get a hold of us. And I hope that we'll see you back for our next episode. And hopefully Gabby can come back at some point in the near future. Thank you so much.